hear the word thug, what do you think of? Maybe hip-hop lyrics? Inner city gangs? Men in hoodies with guns? In modern slang, a thug is a street criminal, often tied to violence and bravado. But the word has a far older and far darker history. It comes from the Hindi word Wagner, meaning deceiver, and long before rap music or urban gangs, their namesakes terrorized the highways of India. They didn't rap about killing, they killed, silently, efficiently, without mercy, for centuries. And by the time the British cracked down in the 1830s, the Thuggees were accused of murdering over 2 million people. These were no ordinary bandits. They were a hidden brotherhood of ritual stranglers who believed every death was an offering to the goddess Kali. They haunted the highways of India, especially the central plains and the trade routes along the Ganges. The Thuggees weren't ragged bandits. They were organized, disciplined, and deeply religious. They traveled in gangs, sometimes 30, 50, even 100 strong, moving along roads from Bengal to Delhi, from Hyderabad to the Deccan. Wherever trade and pilgrims flowed, they posed as pilgrims, merchants, or soldiers. When they met real travelers, they offered friendships, food, and protection. For days they might walk together, sharing jokes around campfires, but once trust was earned, the signal was given. The Thuggees didn't stab or shoot anybody, because that left blood and it made noise. Instead, they carried a length of cloth called a rumal. At a moment's notice, one thug slipped behind the victim, looped the cloth around the throat, and strangled him in silence. Others grabbed the legs and arms, and within minutes, the body was lifeless, quiet and controlled. They were truly professionals. Some Thuggees claimed to have themselves killed hundreds of people with their own hands. The corpses were buried in shallow graves by the roadside all across central India. The Thuggees didn't emerge out of nowhere. Their roots likely stretch back to the medieval period, when India's highways carried endless flows of merchants, pilgrims, and soldiers. These roads were rich with targets and peril. At first, they may have been little more than bands of highway robbers, surviving by deception and ambush. But over time, something changed. Robbery became ritual. Strangulation with the rumal was no longer just a practical technique. It was turned into a sacred duty. A story grew among them that the goddess Kali had once armed her followers with a cloth and ordered them to destroy demons without shedding blood. The Thuggees believed they were continuing that mission, killing travelers as sacrifices to her. Each strangling was an offering. Blood sacrifice wasn't required. The act itself was holy. The rumal, the strangling cloth, was considered sacred. They said Kali herself demanded that travelers must die to keep the world in balance. In this twisted logic, murder became devotion. The myth gave their crimes a deeper purpose. It bound men together across caste and religion. Hindu and Muslim, peasant and soldier, all could be brothers within this fraternity. For many, it became a profession passed from father to son, offering both livelihood and identity. But why did Muslims join in a cult tied to Kali? Historians suggest that for them it was less about worship, more about fraternity, profit, and fate. The myth of Kali served as the binding story, even if not every thug believed it literally. Their purpose then, regardless of personal religion, was twofold. One, to profit from the valuables of travelers, and two, to sustain a ritual tradition that gave meaning to their violence. In their minds, they were not mere bandits, they were servants of a goddess, bound to a duty older than memory. The earliest records of Thuggee appear as far back as the 14th century, when chroniclers of the Delhi Sultanate described bands of stranglers haunting the highways, and by the time of the Mughal Emperor Akbar in the late 1500s, they were already infamous. For centuries, the Brotherhood survived, changing rulers, changing empires, until finally, in the 1830s, the British made their move. Under William Sleeman and the newly created Thuggee and Dacoity Department, a campaign of informers and mass arrests brought the centuries-long terror to an end. According to James Peyton, an East India Company officer, one thug named Buram Jamidar claimed he had been present at 931 murders. He even said he had strangled 125 men with his own hands. When the British East India Company finally investigated, they claimed the Thuggees had killed millions over the centuries. Some British officials claimed that over 2 million people had fallen victim to the Thuggees. Modern historians doubt such extremes, suggesting exaggeration and propaganda were at play, but even their cautious estimates still run into the hundreds of thousands. To put that into perspective, London in the 1840s had just over 2 million people, so whether the true toll was 200,000 or closer to 2 million, the scale of the killing remains almost unimaginable. For centuries, the Thuggees thrived because they blended in. They were farmers by day and murderers by night. They spoke local dialects and posed as ordinary men. But, as previously mentioned, in the 1830s, the British officer William Sleeman led a campaign against them. He was so obsessed he even created this entire department, the Thuggee and Dacoity Office, just to hunt them down. Thuggee meant the ritual stranglers, Dacoity meant the armed bandits who raided villages and caravans. Together, they represented the two great terrors of India's highways. Sleeman studied patterns of disappearances along highways. He captured and interrogated thug leaders. Some turned informers, revealing burial grounds littered with bones and describing in detail the rituals of strangulation.
The use of this was not a question of choice, but of decree. For by the laws of the thug's satanic faith, no blood should be shed during the process of murder. If the onlooker had hoped to find on the old thug's countenance some signs of remorse for a life spent almost entirely in treacherous murder, he would have been doomed to disappointment. For the old man positively beamed with pride and reminiscent delight, while the story of his ghastly past was drawn from him by skillful questioning, literally smacking his lips when recounting some particularly atrocious deed which had necessitated the exercise of great cunning and inhuman deceit.
In the 1840s, thousands of Thuggees were arrested. Many were executed, while others were transported to penal colonies. The brotherhood that had haunted India's roads for centuries was finally broken. From the Thuggees, the English language gained a new word, thug. Today, it's a violent street criminal, but once it meant something darker. A secret society of ritual killers, bound by oaths, worshipping a goddess of death. Were the ruthless bandits hiding behind religion, or true believers serving an ancient cult? The answer may be forever buried with their countless victims. This was the story of the Thuggees, perhaps the deadliest cult in history. If you want more hidden stories like this, forgotten brotherhoods, strange beliefs, and lost worlds, please like this video and subscribe to Obscure Stories, because the past never really disappears, it just waits to be uncovered.